Can you imagine waking up one morning and realizing that Earth has completely stopped spinning? It sounds like the stuff of sci-fi movies, but what if I told you that such a scenario would lead to changes so dramatic that life as we know it would be totally transformed? Well, let's dive into this wild possibility and explore what would happen if Earth suddenly hit the brakes. At first glance, it might seem like nothing too crazy would happen if the Earth stopped rotating. After all, we live our lives walking around on solid ground, and the world seems pretty still, right? But what we often forget is that Earth is spinning incredibly fast, at around 1,000 miles per hour at the equator. That's like being on a speeding bullet train, except you don't feel the motion because we're moving with it. But if that stopped all of a sudden, well, let's just say it wouldn't be a gentle nudge. First, let's get to the most immediate effect. Everything would go flying. If the Earth stopped spinning, inertia would take over. Everything that isn't anchored down, including you, me, the buildings, the oceans, yeah, the oceans too, would go flying eastward at hundreds of miles per hour. It'd be like hitting the brakes on a car going full speed, but on a global scale. Anything close to the equator would experience the worst of it, because that's where Earth's spin is fastest. In the cities near the equator, the force would be enough to level buildings and cause massive destruction. Can you imagine New York, Tokyo, or Sao Paulo just crumbling in a matter of minutes? But that's just the beginning. Let's move on to the oceans. Remember when I said the oceans would be affected? Well, instead of peacefully resting where they belong, the water in the oceans would slosh eastward too. Massive tsunamis would form, and we're talking waves higher than any we've ever seen. Coastal cities would be wiped out in minutes, and those living inland wouldn't be safe either. With the oceans spilling over the land, the flooding would be catastrophic. It's almost hard to picture such a scene, isn't it? But this is just the start of the chaos. Now, beyond the immediate destruction, we have to talk about what would happen to the weather. Ever noticed how Earth's rotation gives us day and night? Without that spin, one side of the planet would face the sun constantly, turning into an unbearable desert, while the other side would be plunged into perpetual darkness. Think about how extreme that would be, baking heat on one side and freezing cold on the other. Cities that once thrived would now be wastelands. Our carefully balanced ecosystems? Gone. This would be a planet of extremes, and humans would have a hard time surviving. You know, it's interesting how much we rely on Earth's rotation without even realizing it. Without it, not only would our days and nights disappear, but so would our weather patterns. Winds would die down, and the jet streams that guide our weather would vanish. The result? Unpredictable and chaotic weather that could bring about storms, droughts, and who knows what else. It would be the kind of situation where you could walk outside and not know if you're stepping into a hurricane or a snowstorm. And let's not forget gravity. Yes, gravity would still be here, but its effects might feel a bit different. Because Earth is a little squished at the poles and bulging at the equator due to its rotation, the distribution of gravity would change. At the equator, you'd feel a little lighter than you do now, and at the poles, you'd feel heavier. It's a small change, but when you're talking about things like launching rockets, this difference in gravity could make a huge impact on our ability to explore space. NASA's job just got a lot harder. Now, we're going to continue with even more wild consequences of a world where Earth stops spinning. But before we do, make sure to subscribe to our channel if you're enjoying this and want more mind-bending ideas like this. Stick around, we've got a lot more to explore. All right. Let's get back to it. One of the most fascinating things about this scenario is what would happen to the planet's magnetic field. Earth's spinning core is what helps generate our magnetic field, which is basically a protective shield that keeps harmful solar radiation from bombarding the surface. Without the spin, the core would stop churning, and that magnetic field would slowly weaken, leaving us exposed to solar flares and cosmic radiation. Not exactly the kind of beach vacation anyone's dreaming of, right? We'd have to figure out a way to protect ourselves or risk serious health issues from the increased radiation. And speaking of space, did you know that Earth's rotation also helps stabilize our orbit around the sun? Without it, the planet's axis would wobble more unpredictably, meaning we'd no longer have the stable seasons we're used to. One year, summer might last forever, and the next, we might not have a summer at all. It's like the ultimate climate lottery, except the stakes are our survival. Now let's talk time. Time is something we all take for granted. But did you know that Earth's rotation plays a key role in how we measure it? A day is 24 hours long because of how long it takes the Earth to make one full spin. But if the planet stopped spinning, days as we know them would cease to exist. On the side of the Earth facing the sun, daytime could last for months, and on the dark side, night would stretch on endlessly. It would completely change how we live our lives. Imagine waking up to 6 months of sunlight, or enduring a year-long night. Your body clock would be completely out of sync, and we'd have to find new ways to cope with this strange new reality. The Earth stopping its spin would also impact something as simple as transportation. The way we move across the planet right now is influenced by the Coriolis effect, which is caused by the Earth's rotation. It's what makes flights shorter in one direction and longer in another. Without this effect, everything from flight paths to ocean currents would change drastically. It's hard to even predict how travel would work anymore. If you're thinking road trips might be a safer bet, think again. Remember those flying objects we mentioned earlier? If all of this isn't enough to make your head spin, pun intended, let's not forget the animals. Many species rely on Earth's natural cycles of day and night to navigate, hunt, and even mate. Without these cycles, animals would be thrown into confusion, and entire ecosystems could collapse. Birds, for instance, migrate based on the position of the sun and stars. Without the Earth spinning, their sense of direction would be lost. The same goes for marine life, which uses currents and the Earth's magnetic field to navigate. Without these natural guides, many species might not survive. On top of all this, the length of a year could change too. While Earth would still orbit the sun, its path might become more elliptical or stretched out because the gravitational balance would shift without the rotation. This would mean longer or shorter years, depending on how the planet wobbles around the sun. And if that wasn't bad enough, we'd also lose the beautiful sight of the northern lights. They're caused by solar particles interacting with our magnetic field, and without the spin, that field would be too weak to produce them. Imagine a world without the auroras lighting up the night sky. And hey, before you go, don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you haven't yet. We're always diving into these crazy, mind-blowing scenarios, and you won't want to miss what's coming next.